Hi, I'm Mike Gafa. I am the Church Leadership Development Catalyst for Luminex. And on today's Whiteboard Wednesday, we're going to talk about 9 strategic planning landmines. And this is actually the second part. Last week, we touched on part 1, the first 5 of these strategic planning landmines. And so just as a quick recap, we started with a lack of prayer. We need to be people of prayer. Second was a lack of faith. We need to be steadfast in our faithfulness. The third was a failure to add wisdom to faith. And so we talked about the need to use everything that God has given us, the truth of His Word, trusting the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So we have to add wisdom to faith. The fourth was to overlook the reality of spiritual warfare. And if we don't recognize the reality of spiritual warfare, that indeed is a strategic planning landmine. And then the fifth landmine would be a failure to celebrate. In other words, we have to be intentional to celebrate God's work in and through us. And that brings us to today, part 2, 7, 8, and 9. And so let's begin with number 6. And the sixth landmine to avoid is planning fatigue. And what I'm saying here is that strategic planning is, first of all, not for the faint of heart. It can be difficult and at times stressful work, and it can take a while because we can do some things that are procedural and methodical, but sometimes we're called to wait on the Lord, and that can be fatiguing. So we want to make sure that we don't succumb to planning fatigue and just get sloppy in our approach and just kind of give up. The seventh landmine to avoid in strategic planning is inflexibility. Inflexibility. And what we're saying here is that when we're planning, the Holy Spirit will lead us in a variety of different ways and according to His timing and His purposes. And when we start to hold our plans too tightly and become inflexible, that becomes a landmine. And so we want to make sure if we're really going to truly seek and be obedient to how the Holy Spirit leads, then we have to hold our plans loose enough to be led. Number 8 is procrastination. Need a bigger space. Procrastination. Because procrastination can ultimately stall momentum and even kill the strategic planning process. And I don't need to say a whole lot more than that because you know who you are. But I will say this, that the very best thing to do if you're prone to procrastination is to bring accountability into the process by having others hold you accountable and creating mechanisms for the whole team to hold itself accountable. So timelines, publish updates, basically making good on what you commit to doing are all ways that you can be accountable and avoid the trap of procrastination. And then the last one is people-pleasing. The Bible makes very clear that our efforts need to be focused on pleasing God, on doing what God would expect of us, and not so much on pleasing people. Hopefully, what we do will make some people happy, most people happy even, as we're trying to be obedient to how God would call us and be leading us to do planning. But ultimately, if we succumb to the landmine of people-pleasing, we end up just getting turned around. It never goes well. It only gets worse. And so that's one to avoid, as are all 9. That's your Whiteboard Wednesday. Have a great day.